Hello and welcome back to the DF Retro Super Show. I'm John Linneman. This is episode number 8, and today's a very special day. We're finally talking about Sega as our main theme. So it's been a long time coming, 7 episodes to be exact. But first, let's introduce the cast for this episode. Starting with a very hearty welcome back to my good friend Audi Sorlie. He's finally back.
Yeah, finally back after I guess more than a few weeks at this point. But I really appreciate all the messages and the comments of people wanting me to come back. I've been dealing with some life stuff recently, but hopefully I should be here for each recording moving forward.
Well, it wouldn't be the same without you, so we're happy you're here.
It certainly wasn't.
Indeed. That's what the comments told us.
I'm calling you out, Tim.
But it also wouldn't be the same without the man himself, Coury Carlson.
Hey, how's it going? Back again. Today I'm dressed in my best dad attire with my zip up Columbia fleece. I'm ready to talk some Sega Genesis.
I love it. And last but not least, wearing the Virtual Boy red t-shirt, we've got Marc Triforce Duddleson.
You know, we're only 8 episodes in, and you've given me an introduction related to Virtual Boy twice already. Like, what does this say about me? Like, is this a problem? Do I need to talk to my doctor?
It's the
is
year
there
of the
something
Virtual
wrong
Boy
with me?
Well, as we'll find out in our first segment, there is actually some Virtual Boy discussion happening. But before we get down to business, first thing I want to do is shout out our Patreon, digitalfoundry.net. Check it out. Join the retro tier over there. You can listen to this entire show ad-free, a little bit early, and even contribute to upcoming Q&A sessions, which I promise coming soon. There's a lot of stuff happening over there on the retro supporter tier, so come join it today. Then, before we get to the actual main topic, we're going to talk a little bit of news, and then also some stuff that we've been playing. So let's go ahead and get into it. So on the news front, we did want to address this because it's important, because we lost a couple, this specific week, we lost a couple visionaries in the game industry. Firstly, Hideki Sato from Sega has passed away at age 75. He was essentially the man behind all of Sega's console hardware. Everything from the SG-1000 up through the Sega Dreamcast. He was a very, very important figure in the world of Sega, and I think we owe him a lot. And in fact, that's in honor of Hideki Sato, we've opted to do this episode today on the Sega Genesis / Mega Drive and the games that we felt define the system. I know recently Sato-san had actually revealed a lot of facts about the creation of Saturn and other interesting nuggets. And it's really just amazing to see just how important he was to, the history of Sega as we know it. And it's a shame we never got to see them come back after the Dreamcast, I suppose. But man, what an influential person, right, Coury?
Oh yeah, I mean was involved in so much stuff. It's actually incredible. Starting with the Sega System 1, the SG-1000, SG-1002, the Mark III, aka Master System, Mega Drive, Saturn, and Dreamcast. So basically, every piece of console hardware that the company released, since 1983, which is insane.
Well, I mean, what I can't believe is that he was there, from the first system to the last. I mean, you look at Nintendo or PlayStation, I mean, different eras have different kind of leaders behind the hardware. And it's, of course, Sega's time in that space was, more limited because there was a definitive end to it. But still, like, it's really cool that there's like this kind of all-encompassing legacy with, this guy, being, maybe the core leader or one of the core leaders behind it.
Just an amazing gentleman that achieved so much. And honestly, and this is just talking about the main consoles, right? He also considered all the peripheral stuff, the add-ons, the things that you would need to expand the system and sort of build these consoles around that. He's also the one, of course, with the Saturn that made the choices that perhaps seemed a little bit strange at the time, but since we've recently heard him open up about it in various recent interviews, it starts to make a little more sense as well. And it's fascinating to look back at the history of all this stuff.
I mean, the success of Saturn in Japan was, a fact, right? Like, Saturn internationally is one thing, but in Japan it was a huge success. So I think he was truly on to kind of like what made Sega hardware unique and special, which is something we'll get into in our main topic today. But he seems to have had a lot of influence on Sega alumni as well, because I've seen like Koshiro, Mitsuyoshi, like friends of ours that have a history with Sega, kind of pay their respects and say that he was influential on them as well, kind of helping them out in careers and working with hardware and such. So it seems like that he was a legend, not just externally, but internally at Sega as well.
That's awesome. I'm just sad we never got to meet or talk with him in person.
Yeah.
He seems like just an incredible guy. So pour
I
one out for Sato-san.
Yeah, I remember the first time I kind of got to like know his name a little bit more was when they did the mini consoles, because I remember there was a little bit of spotlight on him during those. So yeah, you have to think like what would have happened if they did something after Dreamcast, right? Like, where would he have taken it?
So, unfortunately, Sato-san was not the only important video game figure we lost this week. We also learned of the passing at a very young age 52 of Shutaro Iida, who was a legendary programmer with a long career at Konami, and eventually would go on to join Iga-san to work on Bloodstained. And yes, he passed away from pancreatic cancer, unfortunately. But looking back at his legacy, like almost every single game that he worked on as a programmer are games that I love. I mean, it goes back to Sexy Parodius on Saturn and PlayStation. He was involved with the Salamander Deluxe Pack, the Twinbee RPG, one of the Goemon games, Gun Gauge on PlayStation, which of course has Wakel Skade as the main character. He worked on Shadow of Destiny / Shadow of Memories for PS2.
Amazing game.
He did, right? Like super, super amazing. Worked on Aria of Sorrow for Game Boy Advance. Even did some work on Lament of Innocence on PS2, as well as the various DS, all three of the DS Castlevanias, and even served as a lead programmer on Metal Gear Solid 5 before moving over to work on production, or to work on Bloodstained Ritual of the Night.
Yep.
And he was also seemingly involved with Blasphemous, which I didn't realize.
Mm-hmm. It was.
I did not realize that either.
Very, very cool. So, like basically everything that he worked on, I enjoyed.
Yeah, I mean that DS era of Castlevania, I think, was so special, and I when I was looking up what he had done, I believe it said something about like he was credited as like player program for Portrait of Ruin, so he might be responsible for the I would say infamous, but I think it's probably more beloved, Jonathan, Charlotte. So I mean that era of Castlevania, I thought they were really firing on all cylinders there. So he was working on some great stuff in an era where, 2D games were not as common as they are today, so he was like kind of carrying that pixel art torch on the DS, that pixel art style of game.
Yeah, and as always, the obligatory F cancer. I mean, I think that like seeing his age is like kind of hitting home a little bit more to me, because I mean he's only 5 years younger or 5 years older than me, so it's crazy to think about that. Like, he is just crazy young, and and he had done so much at this point. Who even knows like what he could have been involved in going forward.
I've actually been able to meet him once. So I met him at TGS in 2017. Briefly, I didn't know him personally, but I met him in a shared meeting with a couple other people. What I remember most was that meeting was interrupted by Inafune, who needed a room. But he was a very soft-spoken and seemed like a very nice person. At the time, I was familiar with, in our introductions and stuff, like John just mentioned, he had worked on some stuff that I really loved. So I was very humbled to sit there and meet him and talk something completely unrelated. But then now, as he's passed, it's just very sad to think back that he would leave this soon. Kind of wish I had took more opportunity when I met him to talk. But obviously, in hindsight, you don't know.
Yeah, these things hit, man, and I really hate when this kind of stuff happens. But we're seeing it more and more with a lot of these game development visionaries, right? Like,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
People are getting older. I mean, in this case, he died very young, I would say, but it's a bit of a rough time. But I think the best we can do is sort of celebrate their legacy and look back on what they've done and try to keep the memories alive, And that's what we'll try to do going forward. So let's go ahead and move on to some happier topics, though. I actually wanted to. Oh, now that you mention it. Yes, the Virtual Boy, Nintendo's least successful console.
Happy times.
Designed by somebody who unfortunately also passed away. But Gunpei Yokoi. But it's kind of back. Right? Like, so
it's not kind of
there
back,
it is.
John. This is the most back the Virtual Boy could ever be.
That's true.
This is it.
Beyond anyone's expectations.
This is it, man. Like, this is all it's gonna be. I'm amazed that it even is. Considering
Nintendo's shooting their shot.
Yeah, I mean, when this unit arrived here yesterday, like, it really hit me like how absurd it is that I've received this brand new product in 2026. I mean, this is crazy. What else has kind of struck me as funny? I mean, I know some people, including Coury, I've seen comment like, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea it was going to be so big." And I think that's been the reaction of people who don't really have exposure to the original unit. But like, to me, it's like, well, yeah, it's a Virtual Boy. Like, it's the size it is. It's pretty dang authentic.
I thought it was going to be smaller because, I mean, even just like slightly smaller because it doesn't have all the electronics in it. So it seems like
but it's got to be wide enough to fit a Switch 2 inside.
I mean, for fitting your eyes and stuff, it kind of has to be that size, right?
Yeah.
Like,
exactly.
There's just no, there's no option here.
So
can you imagine a Virtual Boy Mini, like a monocule, basically?
Yeah.
So what I found, I got some like soup so the unit arrived yesterday, but as of the time of this recording, the app itself only went up this morning. So it goes inside and actually, and there's an adapter for Switch 1 as well. You kind of have to unscrew a plate and replace the plate. I've only tried it with Switch 2 so far because that's what came pre-assembled. But the bottom of the system kind of actually hangs out the bottom, which is key actually. And this really surprised me because the way the speakers are positioned, the stereo audio sounds amazing with this right up at your face. It sounds really, really good.
Wait, does it actually match the original? Like that sort of pseudo surround effect that they had going on?
Well, I mean, I only tried Wario Land because like I literally tried this like 20 minutes before we recorded. But like I really noticed like very strong stereo separation just because the bottom of the system where the speakers are is hanging out and it's really like directed right toward your ears, so it sounds excellent actually. And this is going to surprise you, John. The black levels are perfect because I believe these lenses have some sort of
right,
some sort of contrast enhancing something or other. So it looks, the reds come through very vividly. I mean, and it is pure blackness inside where there is black.
Wow.
Would you believe it? So So there's not necessarily actually an advantage if you were to play on a Switch OLED. I mean, I say that having not tried the Switch OLED in here yet, but like Switch 2 actually works great. Now, unfortunately, VRR is not engaged.
Oh, this is what I was going to ask.
So that's a missed opportunity because the Virtual Boy is 50 hertz.
Yep.
So
But they could add that later, right?
They could. They could. It's kind of silly that it's not there at launch, but yeah, but aside from that, like the 3D effect is awesome. The picture feels bigger than in an original Virtual Boy. Actually, the kind of menu interface, like maybe it would be different if I weren't wearing glasses, but like I kind of felt like I kind of had to like move my head down to like look up to like see the titles at the top of the game selection, because like that screen is like actually kind of much larger, and then the games are a little smaller but still feel bigger than our original Virtual Boy. It looks, I was shocked. It looks excellent. It's just that there is, a little bit of a frame pacing issue of sorts due to that 50 hertz, but it's not that bad. I mean, I think it's the kind of thing you could definitely get used to. I mean, a lot of 2D games don't have the smoothest scrolling anyway, but I did double check on original Virtual Boy with Wario Land, and the parts where I noticed like a little bit of judder, they are perfectly smooth on original hardware. So that is a bit of a bummer, but I was just shocked at just the quality of the image is excellent.
But what about the ghosting issue? Because the thing about Virtual Boy is that it is essentially the fastest screen that's ever shipped on a console. There's zero blur on it. It is flawless motion. Even more than a CRT. You can't do that on a Switch 2 LCD.
Remembering right that it's essentially like a monocolored DLP?
Yeah, well, it's not exactly DLP, but you could say
it's like it's a spinning thing similar.
It uses
to
an
DLP.
oscillating mirror.
Okay.
And it's an LED strip. So it draws a single LED line, and then the oscillating mirror essentially spills out that line. So it's only drawing like X amount of pixels top to bottom and then across the screen. So it is like refreshing, almost like it's not exactly like a CRT, but it's like a drawing line by line.
But there is like a blanking sort of cycle to it.
Right,
it's just kind of natural from the way it's drawing one line at a time, or however.
And that's why you get essentially zero blur.
Yeah.
There was a video released on YouTube or something like that showed how the Virtual Boy worked at like 1,000 frames per second or something like that. And it's actually really impressive.
Yeah, I mean, you can hear when you turn it on, you hear like the original Virtual Boy. There's like kind of a little bit of a mechanical whir that you can hear. It's very subtle. It's not obnoxious, but there is movement inside. And actually, my Virtual Boy was just fixed up recently. One of the lenses was starting to be a little flaky, so that was repaired, and now they're working excellent again. But yeah, I mean. I know you are more sensitive to any amount of blur, John, than 99.99% of humans.
Sure.
But
the Switch 2 LCD, though.
It's there.
It's pretty bad.
There, but it's not... I think at the pace that you move in a lot of these games, it's not particularly troublesome, I would say. But again, I really only played Wario Land, so... I can't say for sure. So certainly you would have a better motion clarity experience with Switch OLED, which, that's an option. But, just from a pure like visual perspective of the vividness of the reds, the deep black levels, it's a much better facsimile of the experience than I expected. It's just that VRR is definitely something that they really should fix. I mean, there's almost no reason for them not to, because it can only be used handheld. And that was actually a little bit of a disappointment for me, because I was just holding on to a little bit of hope that they wouldn't actually stop you from using it when docked, even though it would just be like two little screens. And it is little. Like when you look at handheld without playing it in, they're like little tiny screens for each eye. But yeah, I was hoping that it would appear on the TV and you could use something like a RetroTink 4K or a Morph or a OSSC Pro to then crop it and size it back up. But no, it tells you specifically you have to do that.
That's a shame, because the other really cool way to play Virtual Boy was the 3DS, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because
there
was a 3DS emulator that actually runs the screen at 50 hertz, so you get the correct frame pacing, and you still get the full 3D effect. And it's just like, outside of the original Virtual Boy, it's like a super cool way to experience those games. And I'm a little bit surprised they didn't at least offer players the option to enjoy the game's full screen. That would have been nice.
Yeah, it's a little weird, but when you see the quality of the facsimile, like, maybe not perfect in motion, but just to get the impression of like, what is it like to look at a Virtual Boy? For people who have never used one, I think it is, you're getting a closer idea of what that truly feels like than I expected.
Got it. Okay, so that's cool. Virtual Boy then, huh? Well, I should have one soon. I think Audi's got one coming in as well. Hopefully we'll all get our hands on these things and play with it. And I want to compare it to my real Virtual Boy as well. So
it's going to be my real, actual first experience, like playing on a real Virtual Boy, like something close to a real Virtual Boy,
right.
In my life. Outside of seeing one at Sears maybe when it came out.
That's where I played it, long before I had one.
I'm sure it was very hygienic. But anyway, let's move on to one last little bit here. I just quickly wanted to mention Dragon Quest VII Reimagined. So I started it over the last week. And man, that's a cool game. I don't know. Have any of you guys played the original DQ7?
I beat it. It's too long.
Wow.
It's way too long.
So I complained about the length before. And a lot of people were really angry about that, actually. And I can see why some people might want that original length. And there's no shade being thrown there. But for me, I do feel like a lot of that game very much was a bit of a drag. And like the pacing of this one feels so breezy. Like it's like a breath of fresh air in the modern era. And like, visually speaking, it's just so polished and beautiful. And I was really happy to see at startup that Hexadrive was involved. You remember Hexadrive?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So those guys have been around. They did Okami HD. They did EX Troopers. They remastered Zone of the Enders 2.
Yeah.
After High Voltage Software dropped the ball hardcore. So that's one I really want to recommend to people. Very, very cool game. And beautifully done. And also, I'm playing on PS5, but the Switch 2 version seems to be 60 FPS as well, which is really nice to hear.
Yeah, I tried the demos for both. I could notice like a little hitch here or there on Switch 2, but it was overall really good. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this because, I don't have a problem with a long game if it feels like it earns the length, but I feel like they just got a little overzealous with Dragon Quest VII. It was kind of like, well, we can just do whatever we want to do because people are just going to buy this. And, there's so many scenarios in it, and like not all of them are like of particularly good quality, not particularly memorable. I think the last time we brought this game up when Coury had mentioned playing the demo, I kind of likened it to we're getting the theatrical cut now.
Yeah.
I don't
know.
We started.
Some of the people saying that what was cut out of it seems like it's a bit more egregious than that. And I would say that like the theatrical cut is probably the DS or the 3DS version, and this might be the
TV cut.
I don't know. The TV cut, maybe.
This feels like it stands as its own thing, though. As a really fun, interesting way to experience the storyline. And I don't blame the original when I really think about it. To me, it feels like they were just trying to do the most ambitious game they'd ever made, and they wanted to throw everything at it, right? Like it was the PlayStation. They were on CD-ROM. They saw what Square was doing. And clearly they, like, you can see there was a lot of love poured into the PS1 original, and like arguably too much, but like they just wanted to throw everything they could at it and make the largest possible adventure. And boy, did they. So I guess the key there is that version still exists. but this is a fun new way to sort of revisit the story. It doesn't replace that original,
No.
but it is a fun take on it. And I
Do
really
we
like
know
it.
like how long it kind of is at this point?
It's about a 40 to 50 hour game.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. Can't wait to get it. Can't wait to get it.
Like right away on the very first island, like the path to get those 4 shards and then, get into the temple is like massively reduced in terms of length.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like mist-like puzzles and such.
Yeah, it goes really quick. I mean, all that stuff was in the demo. Something like the first battle is, 30 minutes into the game versus 4 hours. And I would be very curious to see, once the dust is settled, to see a direct comparison between the original, the 3DS, and this one, to see just how much was removed.
So that's something we might have to circle back around to after I've played through it.
Yeah.
But it's kind of become my evening RPG, and I'm enjoying it. So good times.
It's comforting. It's a
Exactly.
comforting game. Cozy.
Speaking of comforting, though, I also wanted to quickly mention the Rayman 30th Anniversary Edition release that happened recently. So by the time you hear this, it would have been a couple weeks ago, maybe. But I did pick that up to play it, and I wanted to give my own thoughts on it because a lot of people quickly jumped on the bandwagon of pointing out very specific flaws. But my own take on it is that I do agree with some of those flaws, but what they've done is kind of interesting. So, did you see that they essentially promised the PlayStation version, Jaguar, DOS version, and then Game Boy and Game Boy Advance? But it's not exactly that. The PlayStation version, for instance, has a proper widescreen implementation in it. And there's other things about it that, to me, it doesn't really behave like an emulated sort of game. It feels like a reprogrammed game that was based on the PlayStation. So, like, you get an actual proper 16:9, the HUD and everything. It's all properly set up to work, which is interesting. The problem, though, is that the Jag and PS1 emulators seem to have noticeable input lag, at least on PS5. Whereas the DOS and portable games do not. They're very, very responsive, which is really weird. I also noticed, let's see, they had to replace all the music. I think
so. The music for every game
had to be replaced. It's the new soundtrack was from the composer of Rayman Legends and Origins.
Okay.
And I actually think he did a pretty good job overall. I think people are being a little bit too harsh on it.
I
But-
really
but it's
like
not-
it.
I understand.
Yeah.
But it sounds
Right?
like it wouldn't really be classified so much as a preservation effort, I suppose. But people need to look at it as the perspective of a new product.
Exactly. It's a celebration of classic Rayman. For what we don't know the legal reasons or what's going on behind the scenes, but it's easy to assume that there's something with the estate of the original composer that made that impossible. And that does suck. It should have been an option. Maybe they can even rectify that. Who knows? But for now, it's not. But there's a silver lining to it. The Jaguar version. The original music on Atari Jaguar is terrible. It was so badly done. It doesn't sound good. I never liked it. It ruined what is otherwise an awesome version of that game. The redone music, which seems to have been implemented by Rich Whitehouse himself, sounds like way better. It's so much better. And it really changes the game. And so that actually makes the Jag version interesting to revisit for me.
We did a kind of mini episode on Rayman 1 in the PlayStation launch episode where we talked about the Jaguar version, Saturn version, which is not in this collection, PlayStation. I think we even did cover DOS in that video. Yeah. So I remember capturing for that. So you can go and look there, and I remember we pointed out, because remember when we did the video for Rayman within that gigantic project, the thing that we set out to kind of answer was that everywhere we looked, people said the Jaguar version was the superior version. That was the go-to version for a lot of people, and we were just kind of like, we hadn't really played it before, we weren't really sure, and then when we played it, there was differences sounds being especially the most egregious, but there were other differences as well.
Yeah, missing parallax scrolling, for instance, and the bandland physics are not there, so no sliding.
I remember that the Jaguar fan base weren't happy with our verdict on that. So, but I agree with you, because I played this as well. And I think that the Jaguar version was greatly improved by this change.
But the thing about Rayman, as you guys found out in your video, is that each version is so different, and that's what I think kind of makes it smart that this collection includes so many of them, except I suppose the Saturn version.
Well, it not only doesn't have the Saturn version, which I would say is actually the best version.
The best one.
So it's a shame that was left out. But it also doesn't have regional variants, because as we discovered, and we actually missed this, I think, in the original video.
We discovered
regional variants have differences as well.
Yep.
So if you play the PlayStation 1 version, the Japanese version is different than the American one. Again, they shuffle things like backgrounds and sounds, and there's completely different sound effects in the Japanese one that's in no other version.
What
Stuff
about
like this.
Japanese Saturn? Because that's actually the version I have.
So that's actually one I don't own. So like, I actually want to know. I haven't tested it. I bet there's differences there too. So I'm bummed they didn't include the regional stuff as well, because I think that would have been interesting. And then of course, Saturn would have been nice. I understand Digital Eclipse probably doesn't have Saturn emulation ready to go right now.
Right.
It's very feasible, as we know, but if they don't have anything for Saturn, then it's hard to justify the cost of developing full Saturn emulation for like one version of Rayman. So I don't blame them.
But if they get Saturn working later on, they could always come back and do it. And that is not unfathomable for them to do, because I mean, they just did it with the Disney Saturday Morning collection, where they added Super Nintendo games to that because they didn't have those originally. They didn't have that
50, emulation. They added more to that.
Right.
So.
And things like this are potentially, I mean, Saturn would be a pretty big thing to add between now and then. But, little fixes, or maybe they could see about getting the music back in, are some of the reasons why it's actually advantageous sometimes for the physical release to be coming later. I mean, they announced that as soon as they shadow dropped this game, the physical release is coming, sometime later this year. So that I don't mind. Like, I think some people are kind of annoyed by stuff like that, but you're going to end up most likely with better code on the disc or on the game card when there is a bit of a wait. So I don't mind. I've got plenty of stuff to play. I don't need it now.
I hope they also improve the DOS version, because I really like playing the DOS version on here, but one, it uses the lower graphics setting, which means it's missing the extra layers of parallax scrolling, which the DOS version definitely has, but you can't enable them here. And secondly, their re-implementation of the soundtrack on the DOS version has a bug where whenever a track repeats, has to loop, you end up with hearing this like bzzz, kind of like high pitched like noise for like 2 or 3 seconds, and then it restarts, and you're like, that's really bad. And also the music works so differently, because like the original DOS version, the soundtrack was handled very differently than the other versions, because they would record all the different tracks for a specific world into a single track with ambient sound between it. And it kind of just like the way it was associated with levels was different in the console versions, where they would pick very specific tracks, but each track was shorter. So it's just super weird to see all that stuff. But hey, at least get the extra levels from DOS in there, which is fun. And there is the documentary stuff where they interview a lot of folks that worked on these games, and I enjoyed going through that and hearing their take. They even talk about Rayman 2 and how like they were looking at doing another 2D one, and then they just like realized, like, they specifically cited they saw Crash Bandicoot at E3, and they're like, oh, actually, we better cancel this one and just go 3D. And in this case, I'm kind of glad they did, because Rayman 2 is absolutely an amazing game.
It is.
And
it is.
They pulled it off. So.
Is the documentary stuff, like, I mean, this is not considered one of the Gold Master series, so is it like not as extensive, perhaps? Or I've been curious about that.
It's very similar. It's maybe not as long, but there's a good amount there, and it has the same type of interface as always, although they implemented Rayman into it, so it's pretty cute. But so the collection has some issues. Things are not as good as I would have loved it, but it's pretty cool. And as a gigantic fan of the original. I'm really happy it's here. But there does still seem to be some bugs. I've heard people having issues with save bugs. There's some other, there was the input lag issue I mentioned. The music looping issue was there. And also the DOS version, every like 15, 20 seconds, you get a few skipped frames, which may be adapting because the original, I think, runs at 70 hertz. But they make it look smooth most of the time. So they clearly did work to adapt it properly, but it's not perfect. So there's definitely some work to be done here. But that's it for now. That's Rayman. And that's at the end of this segment. It went a little bit longer than I expected, actually. But let us know if you enjoyed it or if we should shorten this part of the show. We're listening. We're taking feedback. But, gentlemen, it's time for some Sega talk. Who's ready to talk about the Sega Genesis / Sega Mega Drive? The Sega Genesis, as I grew up with it, or the Mega Drive in the case of
don't
Audi,
you bring that heathen name into this house? Ain't no Genesis in this house. It's only Mega Drive.
What an amazing system, though. I love it. I've got a giant wall of games for the system back here. I've been playing it since the late 80s. It is one of my favorite consoles of all time. And I think we can all agree, even those that came late, like Mark, I know you were late to the party, it's a good system. It has a great catalog of games. And it's one that's really great to pick up and play these days. There's so much like arcade action on there. It really does just bring home that arcade feel from the late 80s, early 90s. And then it kind of expands it a bit. It's awesome stuff. So the concept of today's episode, and this is a suggestion that Coury had, and I really like this.
Came up with it in the shower.
Where the best ideas happen.
Place. Exactly. It's the best place for ideas. Each of us has pre-selected 3 to 5 games that we think give the Sega Genesis / Mega Drive its unique identity. These are games that we love, but it could also be games that were critical to its success or laid the groundwork both for Sega and other developers, for that matter, on the system. So this is all about system-defining games on the Sega Genesis Mega Drive. So not only will this serve as like suggestions of great games to play, it's also a chance to talk about some of our favorites and some of the most important games in the system. And some of the games I've selected were super important to the system. Some of them are kind of even unknown still, unfortunately, but something that I've grown to love. So what we're going to do is we're going to go around the table a little bit. We're going to say a game and then we're going to move on. That way we each get a turn in here and we're going to see how it plays out. All right. Yeah. So without further ado,
hit the music.
Coury, you're up first, buddy.
Oh, I'm up first. All right. Well, I'm going to go with... See, the reason I suggested picking, 3 to 5 games, we all have... We could have 3, but we wanted to pick more because there's definitely going to be some overlap, and we just needed to have some other options. I actually picked a lot more than that, but I'm going to whittle it down as we go. So I'm gonna start with something unexpected, but I think that it is extremely key to the Genesis or Mega Drive's success, especially in America. And I'm going to say John Madden Football 1992.
Whoa, that's a great pick, Coury.
Coury, I have so much to share about this topic, about American football games.
But, sports games, specifically American football games, were like a huge pillar of the Genesis success in America. And for the most part, I mean, the Madden series in general, I think was considered to be superior on that system versus the Super Nintendo. At least early on, because I mean, it was the game that people like. That was a system people went to for sports games, and I picked 92 because I feel like that's my favorite one. That's the one that has the ambulance that just like comes out on the field and runs over people.
Oh, yes.
Can I quickly share with you my very embarrassing Madden story?
Yeah.
I did not meet him. That's not the embarrassing part. But as a kid, I had like, and much like today, no idea about the sport, right? But I kept seeing John Madden's picture in game magazines without kind of acknowledging who he was. At the same time, I became aware of Wendy's, the burger chain. And I remember the old dude there too, and my brain started mixing them. So for many years as a kid, I thought John Madden was a burger guy that somehow had like American football sponsorship games.
I can see the confusion between John Madden and Dave Thomas. Like,
right?
I can see it. I can see it.
Oh,
So
yeah, I see.
I thought John Madden was a burger guy, and he looked like he was made out of burgers.
He looked
I think
like
he was famous for liking the turducken, right?
He did love that
did.
man loved a good turducken.
So I mean, I wasn't too far off. The man was made of flesh and meat. So, but that is kind of all I have to share about John Madden.
Yeah,
well, I don't have much more to share than that myself, Audi.
Well, let's let Coury share his information on this.
No,
I mean, I just think that it's kind of an impressive looking game for the hardware too. You know, the 3D perspective. I'm not sure exactly how they did. You know, like it looks like it's scaling, but of course, you know, the Genesis has no hardware scaling. I wonder if it's a similar technique to what they did with Road Rash. I mean, I think it's a fun, easy to pick up and play game. In a lot of ways, you know, I didn't really understand football, and I think that when I played that game and then got it, I think it taught me how to play football, or the rules of football.
For sure, yeah.
And I do want to have a special shout out to Rob Hubbard's title screen music in this game.
Yeah,
you know, just such a great tune. It's way better than you would ever think it would be. I mean, he has a history of doing amazing music, especially on the Genesis. Between this and, you know, NHL '94 specifically, you know, great soundtrack.
Mm-hmm. I love this pick because I recently completed my whole 360 series, looking at the launch of that system, and I put a lot of time into the sports section. And I think sports games are often overlooked, or like people thumb their nose at them when you're like in the hardcore space. But I actually think they're really important games, and they do deserve a lot of respect. And while Madden has certainly had its ups and downs, it's inarguably a very, very important game franchise. And these early days on the Genesis were central to forming that foundation. And you go back to them now, like I replayed a couple of these when I was covering Madden 06, and I'm like, dang, this is like just really simple fun. It's not overcomplicated. It doesn't try to simulate football in a super realistic way, of course. Not that wouldn't have been possible. But just like when you pull the ball back and you throw it out, you know, it just feels great, you know. And it's an amazingly cool little game. And yeah, that 3D perspective, it's fun, and the sort of grass gradient.
And this is a series that you've mentioned to me before that is actually, you know, it went on long beyond the expected lifespan of the console. So in some of those later ones, you know, are pretty impressive technically.
Oh yeah, this is something Audi and I love to do, is digging into old sports games, and especially the last ones.
Yeah.
I don't know what the last Madden was on Genesis.
No,
but probably,
I mean,
probably
some go up to like
maybe?
98, 97.
There was
right?
98. 98
That's
was
insane,
on there.
right?
Wow.
Yeah,
and it's fundamentally the same game, but like the depiction of things like grass improved a lot.
Yep.
By that point, like it's
Sound.
pretty impressive looking.
Sound is like really impressive on those later ones. I mean, sports games now I have more of a, because of what John said, like we've been playing a lot of sports games on Mega Drive specifically. And, you know, because of the budget and the mainstream appeal, they were also able to do a lot of technological advancements with that specific kind of game. So it's interesting to see them now, like how they pushed the Genesis from the early Maddens and NHLs and all these sports games. And the comparison point of like how bad some of them are on Super Nintendo.
Yes, that's key, right?
It's like there is something to that point in the US that like these sports games I actually have one sports game on my list too that kind of goes into that. But like, it is interesting to see just how much stronger, especially the North American sports, were for the American market on the Genesis / Mega Drive.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You made me do it.
Absolutely.
You made me say Genesis.
All right, let's move on then. Audi, why don't you regale us with your first choice?
Yeah, my first choice, I actually didn't reveal any of my choices to you guys. But my first choice is kind of the game that put Mega Drive on the map for me. It was the very first one, as I can recall at least, that I played. Because I didn't get the Mega Drive on launch. I got it, and it launched later here. You mentioned like 89 was when you played yours. I think we got it in like 91. Or 90, I forget. But I remember my neighbor had it. One of my neighbors had Mega Drive, so that's why I primarily played it. And I'm a noted big Donald Duck fan. And when Quackshot came out, not just because of the Donald Duck game, but there was a lot of interesting design and technical limitations to that game that makes it shine as a Mega Drive game compared to what I was seeing on Super Nintendo. Because when you look at, for example, the color palette and stuff, it's more limited than something that you get in like Mickey's Magical Quest, which is the nearest comparison other than like DuckTales and NES. But the fact that they're pushing that limitation as far as they do means that you get a lot more striking composition on screen. So it looked like to me like a cartoon, a Donald Duck cartoon coming to life in a different way than what the Capcom Disney games were doing, which felt more video gamey in that sense.
They felt like Capcom games.
They felt like Capcom games. Whereas this was, and what kind of struck me that I started noticing with Castle Evolution kind of does this as well, in the sense that I kind of came to feel that whenever I played the Mega Drive, especially like Sega developed console games, was that they were treating me very differently as a gamer or as a player than what Nintendo games were. And the open-ended nature, the type of difficulty that I was seeing from Quackshot in comparison to Disney games on Nintendo consoles, it felt like I was being challenged differently. It felt like that game design philosophy, which is very different from a Sega game perspective than what I was playing on my side on Nintendo. So Quackshot, while it's not like the most technically impressive game or anything, it's early and it is very, very good. I think it's one of the best Disney games on any platform really, but Mega Drive especially. But I just remember that like there was this sort of like ingenuity and creativity that I was seeing, and it just it allowed me to play games differently than I was used to, and it would challenge me differently. So it always has, whenever I think of like defining these systems, especially 16-bit, when it comes to like Super Nintendo, I think of genres like JRPGs and whatnot, but with the Mega Drive, I always have like striking images of specific games. Like the individuality to a Sega game is just very different. And Quackshot is usually my main kind of, for other people, it's probably like Sonic 2, which I'm sure one of us is going to bring up. But whenever people mention Mega Drive to me, the very first thing I always think about is that very first like town screen in Quackshot. Like to me, that is Mega Drive. It just exemplifies everything. It's like, it's an open-ended platformer. It's striking visually, and it's Donald Duck. So that was my first pick. It was the plunger gun. You can even do like the direct comparison to Super Nintendo with something like Maho no Boshi, which was the Japanese-only Donald Duck platformer on Super Nintendo, which starts out like a minigame collection, but then turns into a kind of Magical Quest style platformer. And yeah, it's better, like there is more color and more detail, but because it's just kind of generic in that sense, because yeah, there's more color, but they don't do anything different with it. I still think that the visuals in this it's so much more striking than anything that I saw on Super Nintendo at the time.
This game and Castle of Illusion, both for me, coming as a Nintendo kid, right? I grew up just with this understanding that Capcom makes the best Disney games and no one else is even close, right? And when I finally got around to experiencing Quackshot on Genesis, I was like, okay, wow, like the particularly the Japanese developed Sega Disney games, Aladdin, it's got its fans, but that it's the game.
You also have stuff like Tailspin, which is like, don't touch that.
Yeah, but I never would have guessed that I would get to a point, as I said, growing up as a Nintendo kid, where I would acknowledge that Sega and Capcom Disney games in the 8 and 16-bit eras were neck and neck in quality. I mean, Sega did such a good job with those in Japan. And in fact, I would actually say, Quackshot, Castle Evolution, outstanding games. But I think overall, like their 8-bit output on, European Master System, Brazilian Master System, Game Gear, there's actually even more on those systems. And a lot of those are, kind of a little more like simple, video gamey as you can described the Capcom ones. In a lot of ways, I actually kind of like their 8-bit Disney output more, but Quackshot is excellent. So that's a really good shout.
All right. Marc, since you're already going, how about you present your first game?
Oh man, I've had a hard time picking which one I'm going to go for first, and I was almost thinking of skipping over this one because in some ways it's actually kind of the anti-Genesis game. But since, as I said, I got into the platform much later because I had an embarrassing console warsy phase growing up. John. Last time I visited, we were chatting with our friend Thomas there in Germany, and I was kind of telling him how when I was growing up, I had this perception of Sega as very cool and edgy, and it's kind of for the cool kids, the mean kids,
which you were not,
which I was not. The cool kids were not nice to me, so I thought that gave a negative perception of Sega to me, and he was saying Sega's marketing in Europe was not at all the same. It was a thing for dorks there, I guess. But kind of is something that I did tinker around a little bit with early Genesis emulation. Played some Sonic 1, Sonic 2 on my computer. But when the Virtual Console came around on the Wii, this was kind of my first chance to really delve deeper into the library in a kind of environment that I enjoyed playing in more. And a game that really, really surprised me is Wonder Boy and Monster World. And this was, I kind of look at this as kind of like the bridge game from, Nintendo to Sega. Like, this is a game that feels like something that could be on Super Nintendo. In fact, it's, one of the relatively few Genesis games to use 256 pixel wide resolution for its main gameplay. So it really looks like a Super Nintendo game in a lot of ways. And there might have been some subconscious element back then when I was playing it. Also, it has battery backed saves, again, not super common on Genesis. Genesis is really more of a arcadey action, limited continues, start over again kind of thing. It's sort of a, I know some folks in this chat might not be a fan of the word Metroidvania, but it was kind of an early-ish game, in that kind of burgeoning genre before it was quite so defined. And, it's just a really good looking, clean game. And while I would say it is not something that defines the Genesis broadly, it was something that for me personally opened my eyes to what Genesis could offer to someone who comes from more of a Nintendo school of game design. And so it was kind of a bridge game, a stepping stone for me becoming like even more and more interested in that platform and discovering more games for it.
Really good choice. I actually played through that last year again with the aforementioned Thomas, who joined me, and we played through it in a couple sittings and had a great time. And you're right, the color palette and look and feel of the game is decidedly like closer to what you might think of from Nintendo. But of course, just the whole like Wonder Boy connection makes it distinctly Sega 8-bit, actually, in terms of its like roots, right? My only complaint with that game is the absolutely enormous HUD, which it has no business being that large.
It's kind of charming. It's kind of charming.
Great
It's
soundtrack
chunky.
in that game.
Oh yeah, great soundtrack.
A lot of those songs were put in Monster Boy, which is
that's
nice.
right. Yeah, they remixed.
Oh yeah,
that,
like
right?
the town theme.
Yeah.
And this also got released on PC Engine as the Dynastic Hero.
Yeah,
That's
which is
right.
weird. Everybody's
very
but it's the
strange.
Beatles and stuff.
I don't like that version.
No,
It's
and the
very
music is not
weird.
very good in that version.
No.
So.
Isn't that Joe Redifer's favorite version of that game?
Oh, I doubt it. I would be surprised if he likes that one. And the U.S. version of Dynastic Hero is insanely expensive.
Yeah.
Just
It
play
is.
just play the Genesis one.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Let me throw down my first choice here. Of course, it's got to be none other than, and I'm sure you already guessed this, Nigel Mansell's World Championship Racing.
I had to tip my tongue.
No. I'm just kidding.
It's not.
It's not, I'm afraid. I'm not actually a huge fan of that game. But the publisher in question did publish it in Europe. I'm talking about Konami and Rocket Knight Adventures.
Yep.
Oh,
That's
Was
the
on
one
my
I think
list,
you
too.
you probably guessed I would have to go for this, though, because Rocket Knight Adventures, I think, is easily a top 5 game on the system, and also a very important game for the system, because this is the first like really original IP that Konami specifically built for this system, right? Like they had started to bring their games to the system, but the quality out of the gate wasn't necessarily amazing. I mean, the initial version of Sunset Riders, it's fine. I like it, but it's not close to the arcade or the Super NES version. Hyperstone Heist that same year, actually very good, but it's still just like it's like a mishmash of the original Turtles arcade game with Turtles in Time, and it doesn't feel like its own original thing. But Rocket Knight Adventures, it's a brand new character. Nakazato-san, I believe, was involved in its creation as well from Contra fame, and it just hits hard. This is the ultimate sort of situation rush game, as he like to call it, where it's constantly presenting you with new ideas, all at a very high speed. Like the first stage alone has you platforming through this beautiful sort of lush environment. You're learning the mechanics. It's high speed. There's like little mini bosses along the way. And then you face off against the first boss in the waterfall before being deposited out over a sea, in which case you rocket across like you're playing a horizontal shooter while taking on yet another boss before blasting into the wall of a castle that's on fire, and you have to escape through the castle before facing the final boss of that level. And then you realize that was just stage 1.
Yeah.
And then
Seamless stage one.
the whole game is like this, where like each stage has like, here's this new mechanic, here's this new idea. And it's like, and some of it's like wild. Like I think it's the third one where they have the rising and falling sort of water sections,
Yep.
where it sort of reflects the scene by like inverting it, but it's like reflective water. And because of the stalactites above, you actually have to use the reflection to platform to see the platforms, right? There's the crazy little like minecart ride. There's piloting the giant robot, blasting into space. Like there's just so much stuff that happens in this game from start to finish, and it's all mixed with this stunning soundtrack that that was mostly the work, I believe, of Mitsuru Yamane-san of
oh really?
Castlevania.
I did not know.
Symphony of the Night fame. So
I mean,
And-
that final level, like the whole final boss sequence, I mean, that is one of the most like blood pumping sequences in video games, I think. Like, it is so intense in like the best kind of way. It's just like impeccably plotted to just like make you feel as frantic as possible and feel as good as possible when you overcome it.
Exactly. And on top of all that, it runs like a dream. Basically zero slowdown, which when they would bring this franchise to Super Nintendo at a later date,
Not the
was
case.
absolutely plagued with slowdown. So it definitely fed into the whole blast processing stuff of the time. But really, the legacy part is like Konami had been a mainstay on Nintendo platforms, right? They dominated the NES to the point where they had to come up with alternative names like Ultra Games to release all the games they were developing for the
Palcom.
system, right? Palcom as well. Like, they were huge on Nintendo platforms, and they came out swinging on the Super NES as well with a ton of games right away. And of course, Super NES still their main platform for sure, but the Genesis definitely got some Konami love, and I actually think one of Konami's best games of that entire generation was this one.
I think it's one of their
And
best games of all
it's-
time.
I mean, it's my
Yeah.
it's my
Yeah,
favorite.
yeah.
It's my I say it's my favorite Genesis game. It's like battling it out with another game that is 100% going to be mentioned at some point by one of us. You know, it's certainly one of the games that was not on my radar before getting a Genesis that like just completely blew me away, and I agree, can very much define the system for me too.
And of course, after this, Konami would offer a ton of support for the Sega Saturn, mostly in Japan though. But they released a lot of games on the Saturn. Not as many as PlayStation, but it started something for them. And I think that's really cool. So that's why I went with it. But that's our first loop. We've completed a loop as if we're playing Nights into Dreams. So, Coury, we're back to you. What's your next game?
So next, I'm going to throw this one out here. This is Herzog's Y from Technosoft.
Herzog 2.
Yes.
Yeah.
The proto real-time strategy game that mixes up, I guess, flying around a plane, turning into a giant robot, picking up units, dropping into bases, and using that to attack the other person's base. This is, I think, doesn't get the credit that it so much deserves for, I mean, there's a lot of people that say that this is the first real-time strategy game in a lot of ways, but I'm not sure if that's completely accurate, but I mean, it is certainly one of the first. And, it's a great looking game, very, very early on the system. And it got a really good Sega Ages version on the Switch, which teaches you how to play, because it's not an easy game to understand right off the bat. You're going to be spending a lot of time in menus, figuring out how to play it, but it has a great split screen mode where you can play against your friends. A friend of mine and myself would build up our bases and not attack each other, and then we would just then all heck would break loose, and we'd try to win in that situation. It was very fun, and also I love the soundtrack in this game.
This is a really interesting one because it also kind of shows a company like Technosoft was a Japanese developer that had its roots in classic computers, something Audi's also super into, but including the PC-88 series, which of course this is kind of a sequel to.
Right.
There's the original Herzog, I think it was on PC-88, which feels like almost like a prototype in comparison, where it's very simple, it's kind of choppy, but it's a similar idea of real-time strategy. And I think it even says real-time combat simulation during gameplay because the game window is so small. But the Genesis actually allowed them to sort of take this whole concept and massively expand it out. And it does bear a lot of similarities to other games in the real-time strategy genre of the time. It's just like a simplified arcadey take on it that feels really responsive and actiony in a way that none of those games could for years. And having split screen as well, like it's just wild to think about. Like,
Yeah.
not only were they like defining a genre, they were doing it with multiplayer right out of the gate. That's crazy.
Right. Well, that was kind of a defining aspect of the Genesis, I think, even compared to like the NES, is that, well, you know, the NES had 2-player games. You know, the Genesis was big on 2-player simultaneous. You know, to make it feel more like an arcade atmosphere, I guess. I mean, that's one of the whole reasons I think the Altered Beast was included in the box, is so that people could play simultaneously with somebody else.
An arcade style game. Exactly.
Yeah. Just a game that's ahead of its time. You know, I think that it probably deserves a bit more respect. And honestly, it's kind of amazing that this game was localized and released when it was. I think that probably had a lot to do with the fact that there just wasn't a lot to pick from.
Yeah, especially given that this type of game, like nobody would have understood like intuitively how the heck this even works at the time. Right. So it's very interesting in that regard. But yeah, cool shout. Audi.
Yeah, my second pick is maybe a little bit boring, but maybe not. We'll see. But when thinking of the topic of kind of defining Mega Drive for me, I had to go with the first Mortal Kombat game. And the reason being that there's many technical reasons, as well as we have a DF Retro episode specifically shouting out. But much like to Coury's point of like putting, you know, Sega on the map and having people like take note of it, the very first time that I remember that the conversation shifted from primarily like Nintendo in the schoolyard. You know, back in the day, that was our message board, was like, if anyone mentioned anything in the schoolyard during recess, it meant like something was happening in the world. And I remember that like the very first time I noticed that kids around me that were talking video games were no longer talking about Super Nintendo was the fact that Mortal Kombat on Mega Drive had blood. And it was just that simple fact. There are many reasons to prefer that version over the Super Nintendo version, as we discovered. And I had the Super Nintendo version because me and my brother primarily played fighting games on Super Nintendo. But again, kind of just seeing it there, it wasn't as striking because it's very kind of washed out color-wise and stuff. But I just remember that like there was just some grittiness to Mega Drive Mortal Kombat that didn't exist, obviously, without the blood on the Super Nintendo. But for me, it defined the system in the sense that like it allowed players to be treated differently than what Nintendo consoles were. And so here you had a game that we already were familiar with in the arcades for its shocking violence at the time. And Sega, with the use of a code, obviously, but still, everyone knew that code. Everyone could recite it. Yeah, everyone recited it. And it was only that kind of discourse. I only remember kind of coming back when the first Grand Theft Auto came out. That like that was this. People talked the same way about Grand Theft Auto as they were about Mortal Kombat on Mega Drive. That was like this game that was shocking and awesome, and like you could do whatever, and all this kind of like, you know, talking it up as an alternative, something kind of like something that was pushing in a different direction than what all the other kids were playing with like Yoshi's Island and stuff. So for me, I always kind of, now I relate to Mortal Kombat, the first Mortal Kombat, very much with Mega Drive specifically, because it also reminds me that that was the first time that kids that I didn't know in the schoolyard suddenly brought up video games, and they brought up a different system than anyone else was talking about. I remember there was one kid that brought up the Amiga because he had Mortal Kombat on the Amiga, and
oh no,
I became friends with that kid.
Man, I'm so glad you brought that up. Actually, that's not a boring one. It's a really important one.
Yeah,
you're absolutely right. This was super important to Sega. And for all the reasons you mentioned, but beyond that, you know, it has its own, as you kind of hinted, there's other qualities as well. Like I still think Matt Furness's soundtrack on the Genesis is way better than the attempt that they tried to translate the Super NES one, but it just doesn't sound that great. But his work on this is just awesome. And secondly, and I didn't actually realize this at the time, but you really start to realize it later. the Western versions of Super NES Mortal Kombat have severe input lag,
detrimental, right? It's
and maybe at the time you didn't notice it as much, but that would explain why the Genesis version just felt snappier to play, because
exactly.
it actually was. The only exception, of course, as we discovered, the Japanese Super Famicom version fixes the input lag.
Yeah.
But the Western version of that game is horrible.
Yeah, it's unplayable at this point. And I mean, it was pretty apparent to at least me and my brother when we got it on Super Nintendo and we could make the direct comparison to the Mega Drive. We knew that like what we were sitting with was inferior. We didn't know about like how severe, but I just remember that like the best way I can describe it is that you could feel the hits in the Mega Drive game. Like it was so much more visceral because the impact of what you were doing was actually reflected on screen much faster. Whereas, on Super Nintendo it was glacial.
It felt mushy.
Yeah.
Heavy.
Really compact and kind of fat. The characters are just kind of
right, because it had the 256 pixel width thing.
Yeah.
So all the characters looked kind of stretched as well.
Big and beefy.
Tall. Right. And it didn't look great. Like
just like I like him.
All those things came together to make that version feel less good. And while MK2 definitely improved on Super NES a lot, it also improved a lot on the Genesis as well. And MK2 was awesome there. But
yeah, I don't think like Coury and Marc, did the fantastic documentary about Night Trap, and Night Trap is something that like now I'm much more familiar with, obviously, but like I don't remember the conversation about Night Trap here in Europe much. I remember seeing it on shelves and just being like, I don't want this. But like there was no like that conversation that happened in the Senate and whatnot in the US didn't obviously happen here. But with Mortal Kombat, that conversation happened. So it just defined that era for me much more.
Probably
much more
happened everywhere.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, even my parents knew stuff like Night Trap from the news. Like, you're not playing that filth, are you?
Yeah, here it was just like no one had Night Trap,
Yeah.
Well, not a lot of people had it here either. But
no, but people knew about it, right? So
yeah,
I just remember it from the
wild.
magazines. EGM was basically my insight into Genesis, like the
Genesis
Maddens and
world.
Night Traps and stuff.
Sure. That's cool, man. That's cool. All right. That's a good one then. So, Marc, what do you got for us? What's up next?
So I'm debating
93.
between. Yeah, of course. No. I'm debating between two more to be my next one. I'm sure the other will be mentioned by someone if I skip over it now. I'm going to go with actually the one that I think is the less good of these two, but is still outstanding. There were two specific games that made me want a Genesis, a real Genesis, that were not on Virtual Console, two Konami games. And I was putting off getting a Genesis for so long because I did not want to introduce another system to my setup that could only do composite video, because I didn't know about RGB at the time. And even if I did, I had no way to use it. And, Genesis can't do S-video. So I was like, oh man, I want NES to be my one and only system that I have to deal with composite video for. But then when I learned about RGB and got the Frame Meister in, I believe, 2013, I was like, well, I can get a Genesis now. So I got a Sega Genesis on eBay along with, and thank goodness I got it when I did, because, it's not a cheap game anymore, Castlevania Bloodlines. There were two extremely prominent series that were very long running on Nintendo consoles. Then Sega had a couple of entries of them that kind of felt like long lost games, and they never came to the Wii Virtual Console. And so Castlevania Bloodlines I was chomping at the bit to play it. And so this was kind of an early defining game in terms of like playing Genesis on original hardware for me. I think it does a great job of showing what the Genesis can do with sound, as you would expect from Konami. And I almost don't even know what more to say about it. Cause like I say, like, I don't think it's as successful as the other Konami game that I could mention. but it's still like, a very good Castlevania overall. Like how do you all feel about Castlevania Bloodlines, or is it's called something different in Europe, isn't it?
Vampire Kiss or something.
Vampire, or is that the Rondo or the Dracula X for Super Nintendo?
Yeah, maybe it's the Castlevania New Generation. That's
Yeah, I think it's Castlevania
Yeah.
New Generation.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's Vampire Killer in Japan.
And Vampire Kiss in Europe, right? That's Dracula
Vampire
X, right?
Kiss is Dracula X on Super
Yeah,
Nintendo.
yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome name.
The
Great
New
band
Generation. Yeah.
This is a super awesome game for sure. And I especially appreciate how it's so unique feeling.
Yeah.
And maybe this is actually sort of a function of what Konami, like, this is what makes this period of Castlevania so interesting, is that Konami decided to produce a Castlevania game for like all the main systems at the time.
And they're all very different.
And they're all very different, and they're all very good.
Yeah.
And that's just wild. And this one as well, this one definitely feels the most Sega, if you will, because like the amount of stuff that happens on screen is higher than any of the other versions.
It's like situational, like you mentioned with Rocket.
Yeah. They throw around a lot of sprites. The pace of the game feels faster.
Yeah, they kind of do some fake, almost like rotation effects, like with some like,
the heads on the
statues falling. Yeah.
Oh yeah. There's a lot of
Reflection
tricks
effects.
with that. Yep.
Got that water thing.
I mean, Castlevania 4 and Super NES was a showpiece for that system, and then they kind of did the same here, just trying to showcase what they could achieve. And there's a lot of great stuff in here that feels good. Plus, you have two characters, and they actually do play a little differently.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not a little quite. I mean,
Yeah.
That's true. Quite differently, actually.
Yeah. You've got the what's his name? Eric, the
Eric
Lance.
Lecard.
Eric Lecard, the Lance
Lecard.
user,
The
and then
Lance.
Jonathan Morris, who's a little more Belmont-like. And
For sure.
also, I think this was the first Castlevania to take place. Is it in the 1900s?
yeah, it's
'Cause
during World War One.
Oh,
isn't it?
right.
Right,
That's
right. Because there's like, I think like skeletons or some kind of enemy like on motorcycles, or maybe I'm confusing that with.
There's the military level.
Yeah, there's a
like-
military level. Maybe the motorcycles. I can't remember if they're actually in this game or if they're only
64.
in the 64 game. But yeah, it's still this like military, like modern military type thing. So yeah, it was kind of interesting to see that blend of like gothic with like semi-recent, within the century history, right? So that was kind of a new visual direction for the series. In a lot of ways, I think this is probably, that was a good point, John, about how different all of the Castlevania games were. And in some ways, I almost feel like this one is the most similar to the earlier Castlevania games of the 16-bit generation, a little more traditionally sort of linear action game, whereas Castlevania 4, it has a different feel, and
It's right. It's slower, and they try to make it feel like a journey where the whole thing connects. Right.
I mean, I love it. Oh my gosh! I mean, the music
cool,
and
yeah.
atmosphere in that, but I mean, that's a topic for another time. But yeah, like in a lot of ways, this is kind of the most like traditionally rooted Castlevania game of its generation, but it still has a very distinctive vibe, largely because it's on the Genesis, and the Genesis kind of brings its own flavor to it. So it's like it's a game and one of my absolute favorite series that is so colored by the system that it's on. So that kind of makes it a special and unique game for me, and very important in terms of how hard it drove me to want actual Genesis hardware. Finally.
Man, you're right though. Like, do you remember level 4? It's the munitions factory in Germany, right? It starts with a castle in the background, but you've got like a barbed wire fence in front, and you're instantly like, wait, like barrels and barbed wire fence and like steel girders, and eventually you make your way through like a whole machine with these like giant pumping pistons that you have to dodge through, and it's just like it's definitely like a different theme than usual for Castlevania, but it totally works.
It also
really
mentions
awesome.
Bram Stoker in it, which is kind of weird. So
Oh, right. Yeah, they never I guess Castlevania as a franchise, this doesn't go forward too often. I guess there was the what was it, that reboot from Mercury Steam where Lords
Oh,
of
yeah.
Shadow,
Yeah.
remember
Yeah.
Lords of Shadow 2 when it's revealed like, oh shoot, it's like the modern era. that he's
Well,
in.
It's like in the future almost, right?
Yeah,
Aria,
exactly.
Aria of
the
Sorrow.
Aria of Sorrow.
Aria of Sorrow
Right,
and Dasar like take
Sorrow.
place like around the turn of the century, but
It doesn't
you're
really matter because
mostly
you're still in a castle.
you're still in the castle.
Yeah,
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah. I mean, there is like a village at the beginning of Dawn of Sorrow, but yeah, it's like it doesn't really lean into its time period too heavily.
Let me just give a shout out to Eric Lacard's like pole vault. Like
Yeah.
that's one of my favorite moves. You duck down, like boom, like fly straight
I mean,
up.
he's
vertically.
definitely easy mode. To be honest, I'm not sure if I've
For
ever
sure.
actually finished the game as Jonathan Morris.
Yeah, Jonathan Morris is a bit more difficult for sure. But
Yeah.
man, Eric's spear is just so fun to wield.
Yeah, it is. I mean, similar to Maria in Rondo of Blood, she's definitely easy mode, but she's just really fun to play as.
Oh yeah, right.
You know, just seeing when this game came out, you know, I was excited about it, and I think that anybody else who had a Genesis was excited about it. I'm wondering if there was any longtime Castlevania fans that had a, you know, Final Fantasy 13 on the Xbox 360 sort of meltdown over Castlevania going to a unique Castlevania game going to the competing console.
Oh, I don't know. I'm sure some people were mad, especially when Castlevania 4 was followed up with the Dracula Double X or whatever on Super NES, which was inarguably, of all the games produced during that era, that's the worst one by far.
It's not bad. It's not a bad
No.
game, but it's
It's
without
the
a doubt
worst.
the worst 16-bit Castlevania. But yeah, I mean, I wasn't actually aware of this game until sometime later. But you know, in fact, I didn't actually get into Castlevania until like late 90s, and I was like kind of just rediscovering NES games. But when I did learn, like, oh, here's this Castlevania game I don't have access to, it created a hunger in me, a hunger for wall meat.
Wall meat. I love wall meat. All right. Let's move on though. Next one. This is one that I've selected, coming to us from a very important developer on the Genesis / Mega Drive. It's from Treasure. Now, when you say Treasure, most people are like, Gunstar Heroes. But I'm going with Dynamite Heady. And I'll tell you why. I think Dynamite Heady is, along with Rocket Knight, it's in my top 5 for the system. I think this is a game that takes a little bit of time to fully understand. But once you really latch onto it, you realize that this is just like pure platform action brilliance. And it takes this idea, again, I love these situation rush ideas, but like this is like Treasure to the max. Every single segment of every single stage presents something new and exciting and interesting. And the whole mechanic here is that you play as this character in a world that's essentially like a stage play, right? And you can swap your heads, hence Dynamite Heady. You pick up power-ups, he changes his head, and each head has a different power-up. But you use that head to do attacking and sort of manipulate yourself around the level. And just what they do with it over the course of the game is wildly creative. Like, it starts out simple enough, but then you're facing off against just crazy, crazy bosses that often screen filling. You're shrinking down. There's multiple paths sometimes. It's a giant wiener dog. There's the whole levels that like tilt like 3-dimensional. There's levels that spin around in 360 degrees. There's entire shooting sections where it plays like a horizontal shooter. And it's just constantly surprising the player. And it's also brutally hard in the US version specifically, yet it's so rewarding. You just want to keep coming back. And I spent months just mastering this game. And I really think this just shows Treasure at their absolute best.
Have you finished that American version, John?
I did.
So did you beat the Japanese version sort of as a warm-up and then get into the American version?
No, so I actually owned the American version for a long time, and I only got the Japanese version in the last 5 years or so. I knew about the differences, but I didn't actually realize how vast they are. And this is also, so another thing that makes this an interesting game to select is that it does highlight some of the practices that were happening with Sega at the time, in that they would often meddle around with games to modify them to quote unquote fit the market, which often meant make them really hard so that you couldn't beat it on a rental because they were kind of worried about that. And Dynamite Heady Boy, it takes that all the way. It massively ups the challenge. When you start the game, you have no continues. You can really only earn them by getting enough of the bonus points after you beat a boss, which is not easy to do. A lot of the different sections are amped up. Like one of the most challenging differences stems from there's a part where you're going up a tower, and Murayama, I think is his name, is the cat enemy that like fights you throughout the entire game. He comes in there and he's like, basically he doesn't attack, and then you kind of have to avoid it while platforming along as the tower goes up and attack him at just the right time. But he also has attacks that are unblockable, where he does something, you just have to avoid it and keep going. In the Japanese version, it's set on like a fixed timer where like he'll do like X number of this attack followed by a vulnerable attack, and you get the pattern down and you conquer him. In the US version, it's like set to random. And sometimes he can just keep doing the unblockable attack like 4, 5, 6, 7 times in a row. And you're just like, when can I hit this dude? And the battle ends up taking way longer as a result, which can be very tedious if you get unlucky, because it is kind of a matter of luck. Sometimes it goes smooth. Sometimes you're like there for 10 minutes. And that kind of stuff kind of sucks. I wish they hadn't changed that. The Japanese version also has dialogue, which I might argue slows the pace a little bit, but the cat actually has lines and things that he says to you. And also when you beat each boss, there's a little bit of dialogue. And in the US version, there's sometimes these like moments where like there's the one point where that little guy comes out and he's like, oh, there's no boss here or something. He kind of makes like some kind of comment alluding to the fact that something's weird. Right. There's like the little angel thing that comes out. He's like, oh, there's no keymaster, Hetty. Heather beat you to it. And then it just kind of flies away. And it's an odd moment where it has like a little text box and you're just like, what's going on here? It doesn't really make sense. But when you play the Japanese version, you see that there is actually more context around all this stuff. It's just been stripped out. So, I still love both versions though. And I did master the US version enough to be able to beat it, but it did take months of play. But I still love this game. I don't know. Did any of you guys ever give this a shot?
Well, John, maybe you can teach me how to play it when I'm visiting soon, because this is a game I've never really been able to wrap my head around. Every time I start it up, I'm like, I think I get it, but I also don't think I get it. Like, there's just something hasn't clicked,
And this is actually a common treasure complaint. I experienced it with this game. I especially experienced with Alien Soldier, which is another great game. For years, I banged my head against Alien Soldier. Like, how do you play this? Like, this is not fun. How do I play it? And then something just clicked. And a lot of it has to do with the invincibility period from like the dash move, where it's like down and something. But once you get like the strategy and the feel down for how to tackle the gameplay, it all just slides into place. And it works. And you go from not understanding or having much fun to just like, this is one of the coolest things I've ever played. And they did that every freaking time. And so every time you pick up a new treasure game, you're like, oh, how the heck do I play this? Which maybe not the best thing, but I maintain that it made for an interesting thing. And at least their presentations and style was cool enough that you would want to learn, right? If the games were ugly, didn't sound good or anything like that, then you could argue that doesn't work. But I do think it works here, even if Audi's not a big treasure fan. I know.
I'm not. I guess I'm the only one. And Dynamite Heady is... I don't think Treasure is bad, should be noted. I find their gimmicks...
I get it.
Kind of 100%. Tiresome after a while. And they're very rushy. Like, all their games are very... Mm-hmm. Like, I just... it wasn't my type of experience. So I never warmed up to them.
Totally fair.
But I think Buckyo here on NES is the best Treasure game. which is not a treasure game, but it's the same people.
That is interesting that you mentioned Alien Soldier, though, because I didn't really think about it until you just mentioned it, having the invincibility frames, is that at the time, I mean, comparing it to games now, it's almost like a character action game at that period, where you had those invincibility frames. It's all about like parrying, like dodging and stuff like that, like at that time, before that was even a genre.
Absolutely. Like I've always kind of thought like Alien Soldier kind of invented that in a way. Like it was one of the first examples of like what a character action game of today actually is.
Yeah.
Right.
That's so interesting. I never really considered that until you just said that.
You know what I never really thought of either until just now. I'm not the biggest fan of Hideki's character design. I don't really even know what they were going for with it, but I mean Treasure does have like a weird look that is like, I don't know. Like sometimes I like how weird their look is, and sometimes I don't like how weird their look is. But I do wonder though if the character concept in terms of like swapping your heads and stuff and, being a puppet and a puppet show, like, do you think that there was any direct inspiration to Puppeteer on the PS3 with its like head swapping mechanics and stuff like that? I mean, it's a very different game, but like, at least like superficially, I wonder.
It's not, I mean, maybe there was some Heady fans on the team. Who the heck knows?
Yeah. But it's, the whole head swapping thing, it's a superficial
Maybe
similarity because they are not at all similar games, but still.
Sure.
That's a game that I find it a little easier to get into.
I find that a lot of this design is similar to like Penny's Big Breakaway. I feel like that comes kind of close.
Love.
Yeah, great game. Great game.
Okay, so Coury, it's your turn again, my man. The man himself. What do you got for us?
I'm looking at my list and I'm like, man, I want to say this one, I want to say this one, and I want to say this one.
I know, it's hard.
All right, so I'm going to go with what I feel is the defining RPG of the Sega Genesis. I'm going to say Phantasy Star 4. Now, I am a huge Phantasy Star fan since the first one. The first Phantasy Star on the Master System, changed what I thought games could be and opened me up to the world of JRPGs. And, Phantasy Star 2 coming out on the Genesis was one of the biggest reasons for me to upgrade the system. And 3 is often considered to be the black sheep of the series, but I kind of like it a lot. Actually, I like it a lot. But I think that Phantasy Star 4 is the game that brings it all home. And I love the way that it is connected to previous games. It has lots of references from previous games. And that is something that you don't get a lot in console RPGs, where sometimes there's references in gameplay or maybe an item name. But I think that it's very rare for console RPGs at this time to take place in the same world and be connected. So this is, Phantasy Star is it's a great mix of sci-fi and fantasy that I think that I can't think of anything that's really been done in the same way. And they brought back a lot of the original team to work on this after 3 was considered to be not that great. But this is a huge game. And the thing that I respect about it the most is that it really had the balls to say this is the last one and to end the story definitively from all 4 games to just finish it. And that is something that you do not see anymore, I think, where especially
they always want to leave open the possibility to make more money.
Yes. And this game was hugely expensive when it came out, but for longtime fans, it was there's nothing that they weren't going to pay, I think. And I was so excited for this. And I love how it ends the whole series. Sure, there's been Phantasy Star Online and stuff like that, but this is the mainline series that it's over. And I hope that they never make another one. Honestly,
wow.
I think that it just ends too perfectly.
It wasn't even numbered in Japan. It was just the end of the millennium.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Right.
And it was indeed the end.
Yeah. I mean, each of these games take place, like 1,000 years apart, but I love that there is just references, like statues of characters from the first one. And there's a moment, like towards the end of the game where you see like a flash of like all of the characters from the first game and the second game. And it's just, just saying it out loud right now still kind of gives me goosebumps because it's just like such a huge moment for people that have been playing this since the first one. So I love Phantasy Star 4. Even though the first one is my favorite, this is definitely my second favorite.
I think one of the coolest things this does, and the thing that separates it from basically every other Super NES RPG, because the Super NES was a powerhouse for role-playing games, but they didn't really do this. It's the anime style presentation for big story scenes, where it's a bunch of like carefully drawn pixel art portraits that are often placed like comic book panels for major sequences. This is the kind of stuff you would sometimes see and often saw in CD-ROM based RPGs, but you almost never saw it in cartridge based RPGs. So the fact that they did that here was something that really stood out and was quite impressive for the time. And it definitely lends the game like a stronger, I guess like the narrative weight feels stronger because you actually get better visualizations of what happens in the story. And you see those characters up close more than just their little sprites. Right. And I think that's super important for what they do here with the storytelling.
And it carries so much more emotion than, when you would see the little sprites in Final Fantasy, like maybe sticking their finger up and going like this. Like, while that adds a lot of personality,
it is
actually getting to see them interact in this way was something new.
Plus, this aesthetic was pretty fresh and unusual in the West at the time. Yeah. Unless you were like a TurboGrafx 16 hardcore player, you really didn't see a lot of stuff like this.
Right.
No, a lot of the presentation I think is similar to PC 98 software, like Falcom era and stuff, where it was bringing that over to the consoles at a very high, because stuff like Highlight and even some of the earlier Falcom stuff, the transition to that on consoles wasn't super high quality at times, but like Phantasy Star, in comparison to something like Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy and stuff at the time, like you just mentioned, the presentation and kind of maturity of how they presented the story was different than Phantasy Star. And I think that was taken kind of from the home computer market and consoleized by Sega perfectly. And I think, Phantasy Star 4 is kind of like one of the best examples of those two worlds come together, and should really be celebrated way more than it is, Phantasy Star 4.
Well, I think a big part of the problem is people feel like they need to play through the first three, which can present some stumbling blocks. I mean, I think the first one is excellent. I think it's, if you're to take the first Final Fantasy, first Dragon Quest, and first Phantasy Star is definitely the most impressive of those three, I would say. And although it does get pretty challenging, like in the second half, like with some of the traps that you can fall through floors and dungeons, but, Phantasy Star 2, definitely kind of hard to get going in that one. And that's kind of been what's been preventing me from getting to Phantasy Star 4, which is, what people seem to really love. I'm kind of a really stubborn about playing games by the vanilla rule set. And everyone says you're crazy if you're not playing the quality of life patches for Phantasy Star 2. But that's kind of been my holdup. I really want to get to 4, but especially because of how connected it seems to be to the previous stories, I do think that's probably why people don't talk about it as much as they should, just because you got to work up to it. I mean, you don't have to, but people tend to feel like they do need to work up to it.
Another thing that's interesting, you mentioned, I feel like the battle system is like a weird visual fusion between what Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest were doing, where it's kind of first person, but you still see your characters represented at the bottom of the screen.
2 does that, but it doesn't have backgrounds.
Right. It's just black.
The grid.
Like one of the ones that sticks out to me, there's like an enemy at some point where you're like in this, like, it's like this futuristic wall of flashing lights, and it's this huge fleshy creature that's splayed out across the whole wall, right? And it's just like, it's a really like striking visual, and your
Yeah.
characters are these small characters striking back against this towering, gigantic foe. And they're able to draw these huge screen-filling enemies in a way that makes them quite impressive to behold in a way that
Yeah.
wasn't always the case in a lot of the other RPGs.
And there's also vehicle combat in this one too, where that one's completely first person, and you get just like, it's nice you get to use the big cannons on your Land Rover. And
Oh,
stuff.
with that like huge like hood at the bottom with all
Yeah.
like the twinkling lights on it and everything.
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, that is
It's
cool.
pretty neat.
All right, man. Very, very good choice, I must say. Audi, what do you got for us? What's your final big choice here?
Yeah, I'll keep it European a bit, because for me, again, there's a kind of clear definition here for me what Mega Drive made different, and that's Mega Turrican. Because I'd come from playing Amiga as one of my primary 16-bit systems, and Turrican obviously being huge in my life, as you can see behind me even. And Mega Turrican to me is real interesting. For one, it pushes the hardware insanely, especially in sound, but also just rotation and graphics. Like, it's just a tour de force or tour de farce, depending on how much you like European games. But what really cemented it for me as kind of like, a lot of Amiga fans will tell you that they had the moment, and the moment is always when you realize the Amiga was no longer in contention. Like, it has been surpassed, and games on consoles, Japanese consoles primarily, are just better. They're just simply better. And Turrican was always the game that always got brought up as like, actually we got Turrican. And then Mega Drive got Mega Turrican, and it was just so much better than anything I'd experienced on the Amiga. It's just so fluent, and the controls are so precise and spot on in comparison. It's more linear, but that improves just the overall gameplay flow for me. And it's something like, it rivals for me some of the best Japanese action gaming on the Mega Drive, because it took so much inspiration from it. Like, John, I know from knowing the guys behind the game, they were like just sitting there playing Contra, R-Type, all these games day in, day out to understand what made them special, and they kind of got it. There's still aspect of it. There's a lot of water that still kills you in this game, so it's clearly European still. A lot of water drops all over the place. But the presentation of it, and just, like when you're up in the sky and you go down seamlessly into like this rainy city, like just the whole presentation of it was very like Contra-like, right? Like Contra 3. And the gameplay mechanics of the weapons, just the preciseness of your action, like you're shooting, the mechanics overall is just so much better than what you got in the one button joystick on the Amiga. So I just remember that, like, when I got this the very first time, and I might have gotten it right on release, the PAL version. I've since gotten the US version. But I just remember putting it in, and like after like 3 minutes, I was just like, my poor Amiga, it's over. I can't hold it off anymore. Like, there's just never going to be anything like this on Amiga. I've since come back to enjoy Amiga stuff as much or more in some cases, but Mega Turrican also has the interesting comparison point of Turrican 3 being a backport, which is not as good.
No, not really.
So it was just, for me, the true signal of, like, people like mention Wolfenstein and Doom and stuff as being like when the Amiga stopped being relevant. But to me, Mega Turrican was truly, for me, where the tides changed. And it's just an excellent game to boot that people, in many cases, haven't experienced. It is really a responsive, great 2D action game.
So let me chime in on that then, because I was someone that had no experience with this. I had played Turrican games a bit on the Amiga via emulation some years later. I never really liked them that much. I thought they were too aimless, and it definitely was that airplane hangar style of design that I don't love about European platform games. But after knowing Audi, I did actually buy Mega Turrican, and I sat down and I ended up beating the game. And I think it's actually a phenomenally good game. It does not have any of those flaws of those typical European style platformers. It's very tightly like designed, straightforward levels. There's a little bit of exploration occasionally, but the overall flow is that it keeps you moving forward, and there's always cool stuff happening, and it's exciting. But the key is that the core gameplay mechanics feel actually really sharp. And in addition, it's also, with people have talked a lot about, they've talked a lot of Wang about the Mega Drive Genesis sound chip. And we've kind of come to the conclusion that most of that stems from misuse of the gems, like creation software, right? And that Japanese games typically sounded awesome, but Western games by and large did not.
Sound
not
like
all,
farts.
but a lot of them sound like farts. Pretty bad. Mega Turrican, I'm just going to say it's the best sounding Western game that ever shipped from this era on the Mega Drive. Like Chris Holzbeck's work on here, like his sound driver and like the quality of the compositions, it's like shockingly good when you hear it. It's still today, it really, really holds up well. It's super rich and deep, and just like, it sounds unlike any other Western game of the era.
And we're not just saying that because
his sound driver is
composed the he composed the ending music for this show.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Oh, that's true.
Friend of the show.
No. We know Chris now, and for sure. But like what he did back then, man, it cannot be understated. I think.
Right.
No, I mean
the dude knew how to make the Mega Drive sing like a lot of the best Japanese composers did.
Yeah, absolutely. Jim Power's another one where you can see that his sound driver for Mega Drive was among top 5 on the system. And he told us a story, right, that I forget if he got dinged by Sega for it or if they were worried about it, but he figured out a way to tap into the Master System processing on the Mega Drive hardware. So it has some back compatibility issues with Model 3, is it?
There's some kind of weird issue, where he exploited it in a weird way that Sega didn't like.
Yeah, because he wanted to use more PSG channels from the Master System or something to fill out the percussion, I think it was. So the sound that you got on Mega Turrican is unlike almost any other. Just from a technical, the dude was just a genius back then, man.
To kind of come at this from a different perspective, I like John's description of airplane hangar level design, where it's just, it just feels like it's just endless skies of hidden platforms that you can find and discover. I was always really afraid of this series because you look at it and superficially you're like, this looks like Contra. I freaking love Contra. I should love this. But then the Europeanness, the reality of the Euro-ness is like, oh man, there's bazillions of secrets and dead ends that you don't have to go to. And then just explosions of collectible icons on screen, and you don't even know what they do, and it's a little difficult to get into at first. And as
we used
someone
to call them Blues Brothers games because Blues Brothers was a super stereotypical European style platformer, so in magazine stuff. So
or Dennis the
Menace. That's a term. Dennis the Menace, or Addams Family.
Those all Ocean games.
Yeah,
freaking Ocean.
A lot of Titus or Ocean.
But I will say, I will say, this will maybe soothe the hearts of Amiga fans whose hearts Audi has broken. I liked the Amiga games when I played a few years ago. I played through Turrican 1, Turrican 2, Mega Turrican, and Super Turrican on the Turrican Flashback collection, which I think is excellent, by the way. I don't approve
Turrican
of Enan's
Flashback. Never heard of it. Can't be
Yeah,
that good.
yeah. You might deny involvement, but I think it's excellent. Actually, I really like just the way those emulations are presented. I think they look really good. Aside from Enan's practices of oddly splitting games across multiple collections, where you might have to rebuy games in one collection to get the ones you're missing from another collection. Aside from that, I think they're really well done. But I played Turrican Flashback. And those two Amiga games, I liked them the best, actually. But this is also coming from the perspective of someone who was playing with a DualSense controller and was able to jump with the X button versus whatever horrors you had to do on the Amiga, which I assume was up to jump. So I liked how it sounded. I liked the level design, and sort of playing through them in that context. I was truly shocked how much I liked those games, because I'm not terribly experienced with that style of European game or that style of computer game from that era. And I liked them so much. And then, Mega Turrican comes around. That's the one that people are always talking about. I'm thinking, okay, this is a console game. This is going to be more up my alley. Great game. But I actually liked the Amiga ones better. And Super...
I could totally see that.
Yeah, Super was a little below as well. But again, this is coming from the perspective of I'm using a modern controller with my first experience with these games. And I think that made a big difference.
It did.
Cool. All right, well, Try. You got to get in your final major pick here. What do you got for us?
Yeah, I mean... So I mean, there might be games that I could mention from my list that I might like better than this one. But since I've kind of been going through a journey of like... the bridge game to get me more into the Genesis platform as a Nintendo fan, and then the game that made the first game I got when I actually got Genesis hardware and why I wanted that. I'm now going to go for, and Rocket Knight was one of these. What I think are my top two favorite Genesis games that were not even on my radar until after I got the console and started learning about games people are talking about and stuff like that. Rocket Knight being one of those. The other being Alicia Dragoon. I don't know how much experience any of you have with it, but it's probably like the most Genesis looking and Genesis feeling and Genesis sounding game of the ones that I've mentioned, between Wonder Boy Monster World and Castlevania Bloodlines. It's almost kind of got like a vibe similar to maybe some of the Wolf Team games like El Viento or something like that, Valis. Like it's got that look to it. So it feels very much of that kind of, I guess I would say like B tier, maybe 16-bit.
It's more technically
platformer.
competent than that though, Try.
Sure. But like, I mean, but it's just got a Genesis look. It's got a Genesis vibe to it, I think, which I don't mean in a bad way, but it feels like a Genesis game. But I just think the game design in this game is top notch, mostly just because, I mean, for one, it feels a little unique. You've got this lightning meter, and it drains as you do Palpatine bolts from your fingertips, and you do smaller and smaller sparks as it drains. And then if you wait a bit, it charges up. If you wait till it's full and flashes a bit, then, you kind of do this like big almost screen clearing blast. And so it sort of encourages you to take sort of a measured pace with the action, which I think kind of creates kind of a unique flow to the game. And I think that it has some of the absolute best secret placement I've ever seen in a game, where it's got lots of stuff hidden throughout the levels and things that are extremely valuable, like leveling up your dragons. You've got 4 sort of dragon-like creatures that you can cycle through and power them up, and they do various they assist you in various ways, shooting out extra shots. And, you really want to power them up. You really want to get extra lives. You really want to get, health recovery. I mean, these are extremely valuable to your survival, but they're hidden all over the place in, ways that feel intuitive, but they also feel really well hidden. So it's like this just really good balance of like something that's easy enough to find if you're keeping your eye out for it, but you still feel like, oh man, yeah, like I found that. Like you feel like it's just this like sense of satisfaction that's just tuned just right. There's just something really satisfying. And, it is a very challenging game, but I think you'll find that once you run out of continues and start over again, you found enough secrets and learned enough that you're going to be just making tremendously great progress, on subsequent runs, all the way through getting to the end. So it's just got kind of a unique pace, unique combat, core combat mechanics, and just extremely satisfying sense of discovery and excellent level design. I think it's just kind of a really special. I don't know if it's obscure enough to be considered a hidden gem or not, but it's a somewhat deeper cut, and I think perhaps a little bit overlooked. I think it's an excellent game.
Darn good choice, man. And this is actually developed by Game Arts.
Yeah,
like the Lunar series, right?
Not the kind of game that you associate with them anymore.
Not anymore, but I've always thought of this as the spiritual successor to Thexter. Because like Thexter, it has that sort of attack system that sort of locks onto enemies around your character, as opposed to just aiming in a singular direction. So it's very much an evolution of what Thexter was doing. I feel.
I mean, what makes it unique is it's you're right. You're kind of locking on, like the lightning bolts lock on to enemies in the general direction you're facing and relative to the amount of energy you have charged up. And it's what makes it feel unique, I think, is that it's more about the pace of your attacks rather than the accuracy of your attacks. Your input is the pace, and you want to kind of feather that pace and pace yourself moving forward so that you have like the charge you need, and you don't have to hold the button to charge like you might in a Mega Man game or something like that. It's just kind of a passive charge. So yeah, it's just got an interesting pace and flow to it that I just find extremely satisfying.
Very good choice, man. I like it.
Yeah. Good stuff.
All right. Well, my final choice, I thought about this. There's a lot I could choose from.
Toki going
go
ape
with
spit.
one that it's not Toki going ape spit. Otherwise, Audi would go ape spit.
I would shut off.
I'm going with something that I would say is perhaps not as. It's not a deep cut at all. It's not even maybe that exciting to say it, but I have to say it because I searched my heart for it. Sonic the Hedgehog 2.
There you go.
We've got to get one
Sonic
of these
this
in here,
whole
right?
episode.
Yeah.
There would be an uproar if not at least one of us mentioned Sonic.
There's at least one other game that needs to be.
There is one other game that has to come up
Yes.
later. Yes, you're right. I know what game it is.
Well, there's actually a couple on my list.
There are
that
several
I
that really do need to be just mentioned bang, but yeah.
When I had a list of 5, those would have been there. But Sonic the Hedgehog 2, I think this is so important. I think this is actually the best Sonic game of that console. I think 3 got a little bit too long at points. And 1 is just the beginning. I think 2 is this perfect balance where you got 2 acts, you got a lot of different zones. I think the visual design and the design of Sonic and the color usage in 2 is perfect. And I think it just refined the concept of what Sonic the Hedgehog was after that initial 1 in such a perfect way. The soundtrack's incredible. And it's a game I still play all the time. I play this every year, multiple times. I have every kind of version you could imagine for it. But man, do I just love playing it. And legacy-wise, it was really important because this is like, after the success of Sonic 1, Sega went really big with Sonic the Hedgehog 2, and they actually did a full worldwide launch, right? At least in the major territories. A simultaneous launch across regions is just not something that happened back then. It was not something that you did, and different divisions across the world were never really in sync. And communicating with them back then also very difficult. We didn't just have like the internet as we know it. There were ways to communicate online, but it's not really how things worked back then. I mean, this was still like the age of faxes and phone calls and mailing builds to people, right? And yet they managed to pull something together and get this whole global launch thing down, and it worked. And the game, I think, its legacy cannot be denied. Not just for the game itself, but what it means for Sega, what it means for like creativity, video games in general. I mean, all the Sonic hacking that's come out of it, like, and what that has meant to people. Like, the legacy of Sonic is so gigantic. I think it's really, really important. And in some ways, I think Sonic is more important to video games than Mario because of what it meant for the community and the people that make games. Because Nintendo was so protective of the Mario IP, it actually put limits on this stuff. Like, we don't have. Where's the Evening Star equivalent of for Mario that got their work started on Mario, right? Like, there's the Sonic
Mario
hacking,
Mania,
the Sage contest every year, the types of things that are made because of the. It's good, but I'm just saying, it's a Nintendo game.
Yeah.
My point is, like, Sonic has inspired generations of people to create and build things. And that itself has expanded out in so many directions to create so many things. It's a very important property to Sega still today. Not every game has been good, but that's okay. It's a great series. And Sonic the Hedgehog 2. This is also when the crew like left and moved to America. And Marc Cerny was involved in this as well. So it's kind of like a joint Japanese and American developed game with STI. Man, I just love Sonic 2. I mean,
insane soundtrack.
It's so good.
And just the use of color, like, that's the thing I think of the most, is just the color, the background colors, and the soundtrack. I mean, as a game, I actually prefer Sonic 1, mostly because, like, Sonic just doesn't really click with me that much. I kind of feel like you have to know the levels really well to get the most satisfaction out of it.
You don't, but that's okay.
I mean... You don't. The most satisfaction.
Okay.
Maximum satisfaction. Maybe. But I just... And I actually kind of like the Master System games more because they are a little more measured pace platformers, I would say. But I'm just not the biggest Sonic fan, but I can't deny the aesthetics of the game. Like, it's just a gorgeous and awesome sounding game. I mean, and even as not a Sonic fan, it's something I'll boot up myself as well, although I boot up the first game more often.
Yeah, I prefer the first game over the second one, but the second one is definitely more important in the life of Sega, just in general. I think the second game is because they really dialed in what they wanted Sonic to be with that game.
I think it was the first game I ever emulated.
Oh, the first one I just love because I got the day it came out, and I've always gone back to that one because I have it so memorized, basically, that I could probably play it in my sleep at this point. And I like the music in the first one more. I don't know, it's just something about it.
I love the first game, don't get me wrong, but I feel like the 3-act structure and the only
it does make
zones,
it feel too long.
Yeah. I also think I just don't like the labyrinth zone. It slows me down, and like I think it's good, but like there's too many roadblocks where I feel like Sonic 2 is basically perfect from start to finish.
I mean, the chemical plant zone, that underwater part with the square tiles like that, that kind of freaks me out.
I mean, as a kid, for sure, I certainly remember being freaked out by that.
But especially it's a little tough to escape from there sometimes. And then the Robotnik fight at the end of the chemical plant zone, like, it's I start to get frustrated.
Actually, during that era, like Robotnik, which obviously would Eggman, whatever, but yeah, we knew him as Robotnik back then. I felt like he actually did have there was a little bit of a fear aspect to it. Like, he was actually pretty foreboding or formidable. I think as a kid, like, you're like, oh man,
that last boss in 2 is insane for the time.
Well, it really was.
I mean, I'll tell you why he's kind of frightening to me is because I feel like Sonic is not necessarily as clear as Mario is about, like, what will hurt me when I jump on it. or when I hit it while I'm in ball form. I feel like it's visual language of like, this is okay to hit at this time, and this is
sounds
not
like a you
okay.
problem.
I think it's everyone has
Usually
just
if they
played,
got spikes on them,
played Sonic too much
Okay.
like, I don't know, like the particular part of Robotnik's pod that is like actually safe to hit sometimes I think can be a little unclear in these games.
Well, I will say though, I did get to back in the day. I got to play this game on my cousin's. I believe it was a 40-inch Mitsubishi CRT, and it was a Mitsubishi CRT that was in a cabinet like a rear projection set, but it was actually like a tube. And it was like, as a kid, when you're like,
they had the doors like
10, 12, whatever, and you hook up your Genesis to this thing, and like Sonic Sprite is like bigger than your fist, you're just like, like it was like awe-inspiring.
Yeah,
seeing it,
I had a
seeing
friend
it that size.
My neighbor had one of these, and it was incredible. He had it was a cabinet, and you have like the doors you can pull over it.
What an awesome time, man. Wow, I love it. But yeah, that's mine. Sonic 2. I think it's great. I love playing it still today. So, and that's pretty much the main thrust of this episode, if you will. Like there's definitely things that we missed. Like we didn't talk about Streets of Rage.
Streets of Rage. I mean, that's what you were talking about, Coury, right? Streets of Rage 2. Like,
I mean, it's
that
and Shinobi.
Revenge of
Shinobi.
Me,
yeah. Well, I didn't even put any Shinobi games on my tentative list because I just assumed Coury had to say Revenge of Shinobi at some point.
It's
I had one on my list, but yeah.
But Streets of Rage 2, that was the game. I was never really that much of a brawler fan. I mean, there were some brawlers that I thought were all right, but like I didn't really care that much for that, like the Streets of Rage 2 style of brawler, the Final Fight style of brawler. But like when I really sat down to like really get into Streets of Rage 2, it like kind of opened my eyes to the wider genre. So that's definitely an important game for me too. And of course, Contra Hardcore, I mean, it's extremely strong contender for the best Contra game. I mean, unbelievably good game. I even like the American version. I'm glad, in fact, I played the American version, even though people tend to think of it as unfair, but it required me to, really learn the game. And I feel like I took so much more away from it because I had to learn it so well to get through it and see all the different endings. So
Streets of Rage, I had to say, was a game where you could actually learn and beat that way, right?
Yes.
Which was rare for brawlers. And yes, Contra Hardcore as well. I'm impressed that you were able to get through it, because that was a game I only rented back in the day, and we played it a lot. But man,
I played it co-op. I mean, I've never beaten it solo. So
for solo play, though, I mean, I definitely prefer the Japanese one, but I do think the game might be balanced a bit too hard, to be honest. But that's part of the fun. It's hardcore. What can I mean,
you did Dynamite Heady, so if you did that, you can do Contra Hardcore.
That's true.
Maybe we should play it when I'm there.
Well, since we're bouncing around, like another one, like I didn't mention, was like freaking Earthworm Jim. Like I know people don't necessarily love Earthworm Jim, but like this was a game I played a lot of, and I have very fond memories of. But it's one of those games that I've just mastered it, right? Like, Audi's seen me.
It's also multi-platform, though.
I could just sit down and blast through it.
Yeah, you can.
That's a good one. Yeah, and that's fun.
We didn't really throw out any shooters, which was surprising too, considering how shooters.
I had Battlemania Daigenjo, Battlemania 2 on my list, because I do think it's one of the coolest shooters on there. And the reason it's interesting for this episode is because it also sort of highlights an issue with the used market, in that it turned out to be one of the most ridiculously overpriced and expensive games around on the system. But the game itself is actually golden.
Yeah. I heard he mentioned Lightning Force, and that's something that should go on there. But for my shooter pick, I actually picked Gyarus, which I feel like is...
How do you say that? Gyarus.
Yeah. How do you say it?
I mean, that's a guy.
Where is
Gyarus.
that guy now? Where's the champion of Gyarus?
I don't
has
know.
anyone found him?
He
adult
did a
age?
little stint when they were re-releasing it.
Oh, that's
But I feel
right,
like
yeah.
Yeah, right.
that's probably, it's Wolf or Telenet did that, right? Like that's probably their best game. Like on that hardware at least.
Yeah, the shooters that I
Yeah.
had in mind was Gnaug.
Yeah.
Jinogu, which it's more of a personal. It doesn't really define the system outside
Jinoog.
of maybe like its visceralness that like it was
Pretty
allowed.
unique, though.
It's pretty unique. I mean, it's the Choaniki series, but Glade Lancer is another one where like really that I think defines a lot more like the Mega Drive style shooter in presentation and difficulty.
Two got a re-release on the Switch, I believe, where they're both on one cartridge.
Oh, did it?
Nug and
Glay Lancer.
Huh.
and Glade
Wow,
Lancer.
really?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
wild,
I have
dude.
to look that up then. Yeah,
That's-
I mean, both of them I love. But the other games that I was going to mention just quickly, and again, more like defining conversation around the system. So one of them is RoboCop versus Terminator, which was much more superior on Mega Drive than it was on Super Nintendo. And it's actually, again, a very good game if you sit down and play it. Especially if you love RoboCop as much as I do. And also, to Corey's kind of point at the beginning of the episode, I was going to mention NHL 94, which I just
yeah.
remember completely like of any sports game that I remember from being a kid, other than like certain soccer games. That game like transcended any interest or any kind of background. People just played NHL 94. And here, the NHL games were actually somewhat popular due to Sweden having a pretty good hockey team. So I remember EA even had like localized versions of that for the Scandinavian market. So NHL 94 was something that like from that EA series of games I actually did participate in because, I mean, still to this day, they re-released that even, right?
Yeah.
They
like
had-
recently?
In
It showed up in
NHL
one of the NHL
2014,
games.
they had like on PS3 and 360, there was a NHL 94 mode, anniversary mode, that was just used the graphics engine from, like the new game, but fixed the camera overhead, so it just played the same way as those. Not as good though, obviously, but the NHL 94, get that Sega CD version. It has the Red Book audio version of the music is so good. It's like balls to the wall, like crazy good. That is beyond anything that you would ever expect from a sports game in 1994.
I think one game that should be mentioned as, while it isn't released at the time of the Mega Drive, I think it has resurrected a lot of the conversation around the Mega Drive, and that's Sinnoh Crisis. I do think that that's kind of, even though it's released so many years later on the aftermarket, I do think that has become a defining piece of that library, because people still cannot believe what they're doing in that game, and it's an excellent game on top of it. So
Really-
it really does belong in the conversation of like, and it also speaks to the longevity of the hardware, because like you can still impress people with the Mega Drive.
Plus, there's also Paprium, which was a gigantic, crazy situation. But in the
technically
end,
excellent.
the game itself is awesome, and the tech behind it is incredible looking. It's really, really like an amazing looking game.
The tech of the Genesis / Mega Drive is its enduring legacy because it's attracted such a robust homebrew scene that I don't know. It just seems to attract
And
more
that's
of that
thanks
than
to
almost
the Sonic
anything
people
else.
that John mentioned. Try,
Yeah.
like
Exactly.
without Sonic, we wouldn't have these people.
Well, I
so
think
interested.
one of the other things we've come to realize about this system is that the big limitation was the memory from the cartridges, the price of those mask ROMs. Like that's what limited the system more than anything else. And once you remove that limitation, like what you can do with the system opens up significantly. And like you can just do, like we just saw the Final Fight MD port come out. That's great. There's that attempt at bringing Symphony of the Night to the system. There's all kinds of like palette like fixes, if you will. Like I just went through the Sunset Riders one, and I'm just like, man, it really looks completely different. And it just shows like all of the system could have done all of this stuff back in the day. It was just the lack of know-how that prevented it.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
it's impressive.
One last game I wanted to mention, just as a quick aside, because it felt like it was like gonna be another generation of Sunsoft, and then their whole thing changed. But Batman on the Mega Drive was like the last hurrah, where it still felt like classic NES Sunsoft, but with an amazing visual design. Like the look of that game is so good, and like it uses that like trick of like shadow and blackness, but it does so with 16-bit power. It just looks awesome. What a cool game. What a cool system. I think we all love it. The Mega Drive, the Genesis, whether you were a fan on day one or you were like and you got into it much later, I think we've all come around and realized it's awesome. Plus, all the games came in plastic boxes, not cardboard, so they hold up a lot better.
Well, not all of them, but...
Not all of them. Yeah. Most of them.
Jurassic Park, Lost World.
Phantasy Star 4.
Yeah, if we had to do an episode where we talked about games that got too much attention, we would definitely put Jurassic Park in there as a game that sucks.
It's real bad, yeah. Speak for
it's not good. It's not good. But
me too.
So, yeah, Mega Drive. What a great machine. It was not only important to me, it was important to Digital Foundry as a whole. Our boss, Richard Ledbetter, like his whole career was kind of built on the Mega Drive. It started there. It was so important, and he went on to be the editor-in-chief of Sega Saturn magazine after doing all the Mean Machine stuff. And he was always really deeply into the world of Sega and loved the Mega Drive. The Master System, not so much. It's always referred to as the Master of Evil, but we'll leave it there. But thanks so much for joining me, guys.
Yeah, of course. Always a good time.
Yep.
Super fun episode, I think. Let us know what you think. And of course, again, be sure to check us out on Patreon if you want to get this show without any ads, get a little bit early, interact with us, all that good stuff. It's a fun time. Of course, Digital Foundry is indeed independent, so this show is made possible by you guys. So appreciated to everyone that's supporting it and making it possible. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye, everyone.
Later.